I'm excited to be here. This is the first budget that I have ever had to be part of and was part of. And to get ready, I actually went back and looked at your previous budget meetings. And I remember Judge Russo standing at this table, and Councilman Gallagher, and making fun of his hair and how he lost all his hair during his tenure as administrative and presiding judge. And here I am, 2 years into the job. I've gotten a lot of gray hair. I had no idea COVID would hit this position, and we'd have to operate a court and try to manage what we had during the last 2 years. But I will tell you, I want to thank council, because we couldn't have survived and done what we did without your support and help. And our stakeholders, our fellow stakeholders, who work together collaboratively. It shows when everyone sits down together and works together how things can happen, and good things can happen in this community. So with that being said, I would like to tell you the recommended budget is adequate to fund our current operations of the court. The recommended budget for 2022 is approximately $64.1 million, and for 2023 is $65.2 million. To get to that and to get to those numbers, I'd like to thank the staff of OBM for all their assistance during this budget process, especially our budget administrator, Yvonne, and our deputy director, Shantae, and Director Walter P., who's been sitting through countless meetings with our staff, dealing with Greg Popovich and Colleen Brown, who's helped put together these numbers. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of them for their patience. And also would like to say, as administrative judge in Common Pleas Court, I somehow got elected to be the presiding judge for the fellow courts, that is juvenile court, domestic relations, probate court. And I will tell you that we have, during COVID, have been meeting together twice a week, every week since March, and talking about different issues. And it, again, part of our conversations has been our budgets, and I would like to stand here and tell you that I support all their budgets as the presiding judge too. So with that said, I'd answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Questions by my colleagues? Councilman Gallagher.
Judge, your hair's intact, but the gray is shining through. You should be more like me. I didn't go gray. I went back to blonde. So you're 100% FTEs. You don't have any vacancies.
Our FTEs right now are, I think, full-time employees are 496. So we do have some vacancies in our budget. Most of them are grant funded. And yeah, but majority, all of our positions our FTEs are 496, and I believe the vacant positions we have are grant funded that we have. And there may be a few that we don't have grant funded that are general funded, but we are going to be able to work around that.
Okay, so those are outside our purview, so that's good for you. Okay, you're easy.
I don't know. Thank you again. Thank you, and I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Council President Jones.
So I'm really repeating what you just said. Your budget is fine. Was your budget reduced by any vacancies or?
Not. I think it might have been 5 or 6 positions that it was reduced by, but I think we can live with that and work with it. Yeah. Thanks. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next is Juvenile Division, the Honorable Thomas F. O'Malley.
Chairman Miller, I apologize. I do not have a copy. I emailed my bailiff to email you each a copy of what I'm about to say, so it should be coming.
Okay. And thank you for being with us, Your Honor, and please proceed.
Thank you. Chairman Miller, Council President Jones, members of council. On behalf of my fellow jurists and the 500-plus employees at Cuyahoga County Juvenile Court, I'd like to say thank you for giving me this opportunity to address you. And again, like Judge Sheehan said, I'd like to thank you for your service to Cuyahoga County. Your job's not easy, and I'm probably not going to make it any easier today. I'd like to thank Judge Sweeney, who led the court from 2014 through 2019. I also, in the back, want to thank Judge Sheehan, Judge Anthony Russo, Judge Leslie Celebrezzi, and Prosecutor O'Malley. As Judge Sheehan indicated, we have met every Tuesday and Thursday at 10 a.m. by way of telephone call. The administrative judges with the court administrators to discuss, among other things, the operations of the court, COVID-19, you name it, we talk about it. Then we would meet at 10:30 every Tuesday and Thursday since March of 2020 with the public defender, prosecutor, Cleveland Muni Court, executive's office. Mr. Corey was on those calls. And we as a group were able to navigate through the many COVID-19 issues, and we collectively decided how we were going to operate each court in each courthouse. What I've learned through all of this, and I was the administrative judge for 5 or 6 years prior to Judge Sweeney, is that juvenile court, because we have a detention center, presents the most challenges, period. I want to thank the folks at juvenile court. You know, they came to work every day during COVID while people were enjoying the Zoom and the virtual world. These people showed up every day. People forget that juvenile court detention center, like the Justice Center Jail, is 24/7, 365. And for that, they should be commended. I'd also like to thank County Executive Budish, Chief of Staff Bill Mason, who's present, Chief of Public Safety Bob Corey, and Director of OBM Walter P., and I don't know how to pronounce his last name, I don't want to butcher it, but I refer to him as Walter P., for their assistance in getting our detention center officers' salaries equal to those of the corrections officers. We've had, you saw in the paper where the hiring paloozas, Sandy Spilker, who's in charge of our HR, is back there along with Brandon Wichnarchik, who is the director of the detention center. I butcher his name as well. But they came up with that hiring palooza, where to the point where these people come in, interview, you go into our parking garage, there's an obstacle course where they're given their physical challenges, and they're hired on the spot if necessary. We still are down, even with the raise in pay. We're still down detention officers. I, along with Court Administrator Tess Neff, Director of Finance Tim Lubby, who's here, Sandy Spilker, who's here, and Brandon, who's here, we've had hours and hours of meetings with our budget. We've had hours of meetings with Mr. Corey and the executive staff with our budget. In the budget proposed for 22 and 23, which is based on a snapshot of a pay period in July of 2021. In July of 2021, we had 64 vacancies, FTEs that were vacant. And I believe that the budget that's proposed for 22 and 23 fails to meet our operating needs, and the county executive is aware of this. We've had discussions about it. The snapshot doesn't include the 64 openings we had, does not include almost $2 million in overtime that we have every year. Go back and look. Every year we have $2 million, almost $2 million in overtime. And that's just the nature of the beast. It doesn't include unavoidable expenses such as non-personnel items. The other divisions don't have these things. I'm talking about milk, bread, peanut butter. Anybody that watches the news knows that these items and the cost of these things are going up. What has been proposed is that it stays flat. We're going to run out of money to buy food. That's what it comes down to. And our position, again, has been shared with the executive. Now, the executive has asked that I accept the budget and that additional monies will be allocated as needed. I have total faith that he'll do that. I'm not here to talk badly about the county executive and their staff. I have total faith in them. I've known Mr. Mason, Mr. Corey for over 30 years. But I even have an email from them that says that they understand that the budget may have to be adjusted during the year, and they're committed to doing so. I trust that. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to be back. because it's going to have to be adjusted. And it's going to have to be adjusted in millions of dollars. And if everyone in this room is okay with me coming back and requesting more money throughout the next 2 years, I'll go sit down. Any questions?
Councilman Gallagher, followed by Sweeney.
Judge, I think you answered my question. So the administration took the jobs out, or took the positions out. You're uncomfortable as you stand here today in running that court without those positions, knowing full well that you have a wink and a nod and a promise from an executive that's on the ballot next year with many of us saying, oh, it's okay. What happens if that executive and some of these council people don't exist?
That's my concern.
It should be everybody's concern. Because again, and I'm not going to belabor it, because I think my friends up here are getting sick of me saying it. I wish it hadn't happened. I don't consider that budgeting. We don't agree. The administration, and at least myself, don't agree with that. And to do this in areas such as HHS, the CEOs, the Sheriff's Department, our jail, your court, where all these lawsuits come from, if minimally sends a message to the general public and those attorneys out there representing people that are harmed by us inadvertently, that it's a cash call. And I just think that's a wrong message to send. So I'm personally going to make the request that these positions be put back in the budget. I don't agree with it. I don't know if my colleagues agree with that. But quite honestly, as much as I like you, I don't want to see you coming back here on bended knee in front of this council with the administration, with this administration or a new administration where you're going to have to possibly tell a new council and a new administrator, oh, I'm really close with the guy that you just knocked off, and you're going to give me what I want. I'm guessing that's probably not going to be everything that you think you're being promised right now.
Thank you, Councilman Gallagher. One of the issues that I have is that the county executive has been excellent in working with us to get the pay. And the issue is not with them. The issue is, even though we've gotten the pay for the detention officers equal to that of corrections officers, we still are having trouble getting full-time up to what we're funded for. And even if we were fully staffed with what we're funded for, which is 103, we have 20% on FMLA at any time. So even if we have full staff, we're still understaffed. So that's why I would be asking for 10 additional. 2 years ago, you asked then Administrative Judge Sweeney what she wanted. I don't want anything. I'm telling you what I need. I need 10 additional detention officers just based on the fact that it seems like we hire them, they quit, they go find a better job, or they're on FMLA, they get hurt on the job. And we have statistics on how many are out on FMLA and how many are hurt, and you see it in the newspaper all the time. The other thing that we have is that we were informed, and after we had budget hearings with Mr. Corey and the executive, that WellPath, who is our healthcare provider for the detention center, the ones that administer the prescriptions, that see the kids when they come in, if there's an issue, that they gave us a 30-day notice pursuant to county contract that they're pulling the plug. We had meetings with them and said, hey, hold on, give us some time to work this out. They've come back, they haven't given us a dollar amount, but they told us it's going to be more money. And I believe we pay them $150,000 a month, but they want more money because they can't staff it, just like everybody else around here, can't get workers. So we know that that is going to go up, and we know the price of food is going to go up.
It has gone up, and you've been told to take basically a flat budget, which from the administration side I understand, but from the reality side, we're facing what we faced back in the 70s, I fear. And those were days that were not pretty. And as we raised the CO, and I think the administration did a great job getting you money for your COs, we're going to have to revisit that next year. There's no doubt in my mind. When Bibby Bop is paying $20 an hour, we're at 24. You want to serve food to people with smiles, or you want to take care of people that are incarcerated not happy to be there. You know, it's a pretty easy choice. So we have challenges ourselves that we have to look at. I think it's unrealistic. I don't think it works to have anybody have a flat budget. I think you plan for the worst and hunker down for the best. And that's not happening here.
I just want council to know that the county executive and his staff have been nothing but open and honest and, you know, an open book for us. And I guess we've agreed to disagree. And I called Mr. Corey before and said, look, I'm going to say that if everybody's okay with it, I'll come back. If that's what I have to do to make sure that juvenile court and the detention center functions in a safe manner, especially in the detention center, because the other divisions don't have this beast that's on the side, if you will, of the detention center. You know, we have 26 kids in there today that are charged with aggravated murder or murder, as I stand here. We have 47 that are charged with aggravated felonies of the first degree with weapons. We don't have a bunch of misdemeanors in there. If you take those aggravated murders and murder alleged, that's one whole house. So, and to get workers in there, they come in one day, next day, they're like, I'm not signing up for this.
For the record, Councilwoman Simon is present.
Well, thanks for your time.
And Councilman Sweeney is next, followed by Conwell and Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your
Me?
Honor, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, very straightforward. And you said if I have to, I'll come back, but you really don't want to.
I would, I
And
have
that's what
better
I,
things to do, yes.
yeah, and that's what I see. And you just want to have the ability through the chair to do your job,
Correct.
and the other elected officials that are judges with you. You're the first one that came up and said, this budget's not going to work for me. And the whole FTE, then a snapshot, you gave a very specific time in the budgeting process, caused your budget to reflect this, right?
Correct.
So, and we were talking about the full-time employees. What portion of the 4 million is not full-time employees? Like the food and stuff, is it 2 million, 2 million, is it 1 million?
Mr. Lubby, who is our Director of Finances here, would probably be able to dig into the weeds and answer those
Just a
questions.
little, because you can come up and just answer it if you would like, if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, absolutely.
Huh?
1.5 million to 2 million.
Thank you.
Yep.
So that just gets a little different perspective. The flat budget is having more of an impact, just not employees.
Correct.
It's on a bunch of other stuff that equals almost half of the cut. So my world is very simple, is you need this to run your budget, and or run your responsibilities. If there's a breakdown, isn't there a system in place, because it's a separate branch of government, that you can say, thank you, Cuyahoga County and council and the administration, but we're going to seek our budget in another way?
There is.
Through the state, and you don't want to do that.
I don't.
And I don't think we should have to put you through it. So there's a bit of, if I have to, and then there's the step of the state through the Constitution, and then it's our choice to be able to work with this administration to come up with a solution that we recommend to the executive. He can veto it if he wants, but I don't think that's going to happen. And then at the end of the day, I want you as whole as possible. So I just want to go through that sequence so I have a full
Thank you.
understanding. And we'll just see where it goes. And I want to be very supportive of the work of you and your fellow judges over there, because I know how hard it is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilwoman Conwell,
Thank you.
followed by Tron.
Through the chair to
And
Judge
Simon.
O'Malley. Councilman Sweeney asked a couple of my questions, but you stated 2 million overtime cost every year in your budget. Was it more during the onset of the pandemic?
It's again, Mr. Lubby would know that, but it's usually about 1.8 to 2 million, and it has been for the last 3 years, pandemic or no pandemic.
Pandemic didn't play any?
No.
Okay. Can you provide us with a written estimate of what you expect in the budget, of what was not in the budget that you,
Do it, we have supplied all that information to OBM, but we can get it to you.
okay. And any incentives to get workforce back up? Any ideas that you guys are working on, and is that included in what you sent to OBM?
That was included as well.
Okay, thank you.
And Councilman Tron?
Thank you, Your Honor. I don't know if you've been paying attention to some of the other budgets as they've been presented, but just to give you a background as far as what's being said, we have, for example, somebody maybe has 120 slots in their department. They have 100 filled. They have 100 filled time after time after time, and that's what we've been paying to. And so what was suggested was that we budget for the 100. Seems pretty logical to me. You're coming here, as Mr. Sweeney, Councilman Sweeney said, with a different message. You're saying that you see cost increases that are going to be driven by inflation. This whole supply chain is all askew. Things are going to run differently. And if we just heard that represents approximately almost close to $2 million with your expense. So if it's going to grow at the 8%, and we know gasoline is going crazy, all these other costs are going out of line, you're giving us a different message. You're not saying that your flat line is what you've done historically. You're saying that I need this money because I can see that a major portion of yours is operating costs. This is not headcount. This is just pure. That by itself tells me that we have a different conversation going on with your department than any of the other departments. And I would wholeheartedly not encourage us going flatline because you've already told us there's just no way. And anybody who's gone out and bought a loaf of bread this weekend, anybody that's filled up the gas tank this morning knows exactly that you are telling us that because you have the detention center, you have to adjust this right now. And I see no reason to approve a flat budget for your department. But that being said, that's a different conversation than these other areas. And so I would encourage you, if you could go back and look at it and say, all right, here's my best guess, here's my best assessment, here's my forecasting of what I think the cost is, the inflation, and you're still not going to get it right, by the way. No, the forecasters aren't going to get it right as far as what's going to go on with inflation because it's anybody's guess as to how fast we're going to spiral out of control on some of these areas. But I would encourage you to go back and look at those things and say, okay, this is my estimate. And in which case, then, when you come back, if you have misjudged it, you're not doing the same thing. You're saying, okay, I missed it by 2 points, or I'm over budget.
And thank you. In my conversations, again, with the county executive staff was, I cannot take it because I can't get up and tell this group that I'm okay with it, and then in 3 months, I'm back here needing more money. And you telling me, well, you were just here in November saying you're all right with the budget. And they knew that coming into it, that that the budget that was proposed to us isn't going to work. And back out, we had 64 full-time FTEs in July. We've only been able to, we still have 55. And it's just that, and we need these people. I don't even have a magistrate. I'm the only judge that doesn't have a magistrate to help with my delinquency docket. I'm down a clerk. Other judges are down a clerk, and we're not hiring these folks in an attempt to try to save some money.
Well, the other speakers came before us and said, and by using that analogy, that they had 120 slots and they only need 100, their comments were, I may need 102, 103, whatever it happens to be. You're coming to us and saying, there's no way I can do it because I already know my costs, and I know I'm not going to be flat. So that's a different message, as I think Councilman Sweeney is recognized. That's a different message than anybody else, because if the last 10 years, by analogy, they only needed 100, I have no problem with a flat budget for 100 people if that's what they've been doing year after year after year. You're coming up and telling us that these costs are going to go up, and we all know that that's going to happen. One question I have, though, is I'm also just as much bothered by your budget that says you are budgeting this much overtime, and it's happened year after year after year. That bothers me as a businessman just as much as the other way around. Can't we factor in full-time employees for those slots so you are not doing the overtime budget? Because that costs us time and a half for that same cost. So it costs us 50% more per hour to do that same hiring. Can't we hire them as permanent slots so we don't have the overtime or reduce the overtime?
And thank you. That's why 2 years ago, we asked for 10 additional. In an attempt, we thought, and we still believe that today, that if we can get 10 additional detention officers, the overtime will go down. We've made strides over, and Brandon has, director of the detention center, we've included the detention officers in the scheduling process. As you know, we have, there's issues with the union right now. There's lawsuits and things that I don't want to comment on, but we've brought those folks in. I've gone down personally with Court Administrator Neff, and we told them that, one, that they're going to get more money equal to the corrections officers, and two, that we're going to have them at the table in an attempt to reduce the overtime. If you're making the schedule and Mr. Jones is sitting at the table, no offense, at the table in the detention center, and he's saying, okay, I want to work this schedule, then we figure they'll show up. We're bending over backwards to accommodate them, to get them to come in our overtime. If we had these 10 additional, we think that would bridge the gap, so to speak.
So you would, if you went back and redid your budget with the 10 additional, you would reduce your overtime?
That's our hope.
Hope's not a strategy.
I know.
We all know
That's
that.
our strategy, I should say.
What's that?
That's our strategy. then.
Okay, all right. I would be thoroughly in favor of redoing your budgets that would include the 10 which you need to mitigate your overtime and to cover the cost of the operations, because these costs are going to go up. There's no question about it. Inflation is going to drive these costs up for the next, for this next 2-year budget. And the only uncertainty, it's certain it's going to go up. The uncertainty is how much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you. Good afternoon,
Hi.
Your Honor. I've been reading about, you brought up the union, and there's litigation, I understand, in the courts. However, what I have seen is that 860 was very vocal about the necessity of raising the wages to retain staff, to attract staff, and the proposal in 2019 that was set forth actually is almost identical to that which you're seeking now to pay your COs and staff. I'm a little worried about the detention center not having union reps because of what's happening there. Are you able to speak to that about, the flexible hours, the morale? That all have to do with, it's not just throwing money at it, it's about the morale there and everything that's transpired since the union left. You don't need to necessarily touch on litigation that's pending, but I want to understand what happened with regard to the staffing issue and the union being able to protect those workers to some extent.
Well, due to the fact that I may be a witness, I don't feel comfortable responding to that question. And I'm not trying to,
No.
off the answer, but there's still a lawsuit out there with my name on it. So,
Okay, that's understood. I understand. I just need to express that this isn't simply all of a sudden we're all going to give this money. There's issues that I understand, that even CPR is not being covered, training for these COs, and everything has deteriorated over the past 2 years that we find ourselves in now, trying to catch up and right the ship. And it's so I'd like, if you do come back at some point, we're going to have to address that what happened with the absence of the union and what happened to the detention center. Metro Health left. Now you have WellPath providing medical care. Is that correct? What's the term of that contract?
They can terminate it with 30-day notice.
Okay, and what's your assessment of WellPath?
As far as my
Their
assessment.
medical, the medical they're providing to the
Oh,
juveniles?
it's sufficient. It's sufficient. I mean, it works.
I
We have
understand.
no complaints about them,
Okay,
other than they notified us that they're having trouble retaining employees because they're all going somewhere else because the dollar seems to be a little better elsewhere.
have you also understood that some of the vacancy at WellPath and people leaving is because of the conditions of the medical care and the conditions at the Juvenile Justice Center in detention? That, there's frustration, I've heard, that they cannot even provide the care that's necessary for these juveniles because of what's going on with the COs and the vacancies and things.
I'm not, again, I'm hesitant to respond to.
Okay. I mean, these are all concerns to us as a body. What we've seen at the jail, the Cuyahoga County Jail, I see a parallel to what's happening at the Juvenile Detention Center. And I think we have to not only put money at this, but have a more broad conversation about what it's going to take to make this a humane place for these juveniles to go and be handled in the appropriate manner. And there's a place to have dental work done at the juvenile, we put all these things there that aren't being utilized. I thought when they built the juvenile detention center, there's a place to get dental care. And I think that's just sitting there idle. So there's a lot more I think we can talk about on how to improve those conditions.
And the director of the detention centers here, what I will say is WellPath, Metro, UH, and the clinic didn't want anything to do with it. I don't even think they bid on it, a couple of them. So we have WellPath, not by default, but we have WellPath.
I'm glad
And we've had
there.
conversations, with the county executive and Mr. Mason and Mr. Corey, and when WellPath notified us, we all zoomed on the screen and said, now what do we do? They told us they were leaving October 24th or 26th. And we scrambled and I got them to agree to, take a step back. So that's where we're at now. We still haven't heard back from them, other than we know that they were going to ask for more money. We know that. They've told us that. How much, we don't know. And the executive didn't know that either. Nobody's given us a dollar amount.
I appreciate you answering what you're able to answer, but I had to raise these issues. Everything's connected. WellPath, Metro's unwillingness to go in there, lack of protection, I believe, for the workers, the COs, the rates in which they're being paid, all of that's connected together. And we can't just look at one thing and say, okay, we're going to give you money, but we're not going to look at everything else that's associated and related to this detention center. So I think might be important to come back to talk about these other issues with more detail. I think that would be important to me. Thank you.
If you want me to come back and talk in detail, we're going to have to wait till the lawsuit's over.
Yeah, when might that be over?
Good question. I wish it was over now, but it's not.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Baker.
Thank you, and thank you, Your Honor, for coming today. A couple things that I'm a little uncomfortable with. It is probable that you will be back, and if you're back, that means that we are approving a budget and we'll be out of budget when you ask us for more dollars. And I, unlike perhaps my colleague, I think our correction officers, I think they're going to be out of budget. Their jobs fair went very well, and I think as it stands now, they're out of budget. And the social workers certainly don't want to hamper any opportunity to hire if needed. It's probable that they will be back. And the IT has 15 positions that are very much needed. We're using contractors in many cases, and it is probable that they will be back. So just for the record, I'm uncomfortable in approving a budget that we all know will be out of budget when we start getting the requests in January and February, or even mid to late next year, for things that we know today will probably be needed. And that's really not a question to you, but just for the record, you will know that when you come back to us, I'm, not going to be too happy about approving more money when we approved a budget that we thought was sufficient to begin with. Thank you for that chance to say that.
Council President Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Judge O'Malley, a few things. Councilwoman Simon, I have to echo her comments. We certainly have concern that things are going well at the juvenile justice. I see the parallels with the jail as well. And I just remember the sheriff saying to me, if we had more employees, we could keep more employees. That was just the culture that they had. If they could hire more, he felt they could retain more. That was certainly just a strategy for him. But again, obviously there have to be strategies around how you hire and retain as well. And Councilwoman Simon has certainly expressed some of the concerns that I've had around what could be done there. But first, I would like to be clear on just what the ask would be if we were to consider restoring and I'm certainly not even opposed to it, because I think the dollars may be needed. I want to be clear on just what that dollar amount is. What, you know what that dollar amount is to restore things to the targeted levels that you feel are appropriate, and again, to meet the operational costs.
Are you talking about detention officers, overtime, food, the whole?
Capturing your strategy of 10 additional, because you feel you could bring the overtime down, is there a targeted dollar amount and targeted staffing level?
I believe, as far as a dollar amount, and again, Mr. Lubby can address this, but I believe I was informed that it would be in the area of 3.3 million for the detention center alone.
3.3 million, and that also includes the operating costs.
Or are you talking about?
You can help if you want.
Sure. As they say,
Just
stay in
state
your
your name
lane.
for the
I'm out of
record.
my lane now.
Good morning, Council. As the judge
State
referenced.
your name, just so.
Good morning. I'm Tim Lubby, the Fiscal Director for the Juvenile Court. I think the numbers is larger than that, unfortunately, because when you take into consideration the other operating costs and the calculation as to whether it's an 8%, a 15% increase over those, you're looking at probably a total cost of about $8 million.
And is that over the biennium or per year?
That would be in addition to the OBM's current projected 22 budget, and then a 2% COLA on just the personnel expenses for that amount. So I would say for 22, another $8 million in addition to what OBM is currently forecast.
And would it be about the same for 23?
Yep, close.
Okay.
16 across the biennium. And this include, that number reflects the strategy of 10 additional employees in an effort to bring down the overtime use,
It does.
operational needs, food, and other things that capture that as well.
And those are staggeringly scary. I mean, we have vendors right now that are projecting 20 to 30%. I mean, they're sending us emails. We are having a difficult time getting food into the detention facility just because of logistical issues, not to mention vendors telling us, expect that before the end of the year, let alone into 22 and 23, that you're going to see a 20 to 30% increase on your operation expenses. So, yes.
Have there been conversations around how to improve the retention? And if so, can you share?
I wouldn't be the person to ask. The Brandon or the HR directors here, and they're certainly more versed than myself in those areas.
Good afternoon. I'm Brandon Winarchik. I'm the superintendent of the detention facility. I think to Council President Jones's point, one of the things that we have seen is that as we had kind of erosion in staffing levels, it makes everybody feel less safe. So hire more helps retain more. I do believe that that is a fact. Since our paloozas have really kicked into high gear, we've seen an onboarding strategy in the last 2 to 3 months that have already increased our numbers by about 25 staff. And as to Councilperson Simon's point, the just the morale and the vibe of the staff is much better. I think to your point as well, the offering the greater financial compensation, that was helpful because perhaps we were going to see a kind of an outpouring of staff. If I can make, $6 an hour more going to the Justice Center and dealing with essentially the same problems, why wouldn't I do that? So I don't know that that encourages people to apply, but it prevented further erosion and further losses. We have talked about attendance-based incentives. We are circling back, as the judge spoke to having the staff members have a greater voice in selecting their shifts, putting in some provisions that haven't existed, or at least haven't existed in years and years, of giving them greater flexibility and being able to exchange shifts if there's a conflict in their personal life. So just some kind of things that will keep the staffing level up while also keeping morale up.
Brandon, what is your current staffing level and what is that targeted staff level? I know it's a rate, you hire and people leave, but what is that targeted, current level and targeted staff level?
So that's a tough question to answer because we could talk about like raw numbers of the 103 positions, how many vacancies do we have, and that's always very fluid, but I think as of this morning, I think Director of Human Resources told me we were at 8 as far as direct care staff. but it kind of breaks down as to where they're located within the building and the population at any given day, because there's certain ratios that we have to maintain by code. And it's not just a ratio of I have 10 officers in the building and 120 kids in the building. It's how many kids do I have here? How many officers do I have watching? And I don't want to get too far in the weeds because I will bore people to tears. But it's
Plus, we don't have time for it.
correct. And it's something I could spend a whole day talking about. But the strategy would be to get to the full 103 that we have on the org chart now, and then plus 10, because presently the staffing pattern doesn't contemplate leave.
So I heard 103 plus 10 is 113, and you're not there yet.
Correct.
Not exactly sure where you are.
Well, as of this morning, about 95 of the 103.
Thank you.
To follow up on that briefly, you said currently you have 95,
That's my understanding, yes.
and is that 95 actually working, or are some of those on a FMLA, and if so, how many?
The report I received this morning was we had 30 people on intermittent FMLA, so at any given time they could call and have allowances that they could be absent today. We had 9 on full-time FMLA, like a continuous leave and or a military leave in there, and we had 3 on light duty.
You have 9 on permanent MLA, 3 on light duty, and 30 on intermittent. So you would subtract, that's 12, that's a total of 42, so you would subtract the 42 from the 95. Does that mean you only have 53 that are fully available?
Fully available, yes. Now, the intermittent people could show up to work today, or, you know, if they have a flare-up or an allowable condition, I mean, they may miss. It's a kind of a variable that's tough to schedule for.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you. You said, I was just trying to follow your numbers there. Your target, you're at 95. Your target is 103?
103 is what's currently on the org chart, and is
Okay.
currently,
So that'd be your target? And if
we
you're
would
going
like to go the 10 over.
and you want to go 10 over, which would be 113, if I'm just following the math. And I'm just doing back of the envelope numbers. I just heard that it's going to be $8 million per year for 2 years, each year, is the increase that you want.
That is across, that's the overtime, that's the food, that's everything, I believe.
Yeah, but if we hire the 10, the overtime has got to drop, is what I also
It
heard.
should, absolutely. So if the overtime is $1.8 to $2 million historically,
Right.
those 10 officers are going to run you about $500,000 in salaries, and then about another $250,000 to $300,000 in the
I
other
even gave you a
stuff.
better number. I came up with $1 million, so I rounded it to $1 million is what it might. So if it's going to cost me $2 million and I'm going to spend $1 million, it's still going to cost me $1 million in overtime if I'm doing the back of the envelope. So that's 10 people. It cost me $1 million. How did I get to $8 million? Because I don't believe the inflation is going to be $7 million.
So if you look at, we're about $25 million in non-personnel expenses, and that's including general fund and HHS funds. And so if you look at that and you make some projections, depending on what you think those cost increases are going to get, that's a pretty big number.
So $7 million is just what you are anticipating are the inflationary costs on your department.
I don't know that I have that number specifically.
Well, you gave us a specific number of 8,
They
so
need- so-
I'm just backing into your number.
So couple factors. So the 10 million, the 10 new personnel was not originally factored in the number when we were talking back in July with OBM. And so the deficit, when they did the capture in July, was about $6 million in personnel expenses. That included about $2 million because they didn't capture the overtime. So the all personnel expenses to bring us up into our normal operations was close to $6 million. And then I'm projecting about at least another $2 million for these added increases.
So your 103 is not what you're budgeting for? 103 personnel that you just, 95, which your target is 103, so that you're not budgeting for 103?
We were, in our proposal back to OBM, it included that 103. It did not include the 10. That's been.
Yeah, I got that. The 10 is $1 million that
Yep.
you've already identified.
Okay.
And 2 million is overtime, so therefore the delta on that is $1 million, that you're still going to pay another $1 million worth of overtime. I'm having a hard time getting to 8 million from what you just have described.
I can give you much more.
Love to, thank you. If you're going to come back and ask for 8 million times 2 is 16, I'm just as much in favor of getting it right.
Yeah.
But I'm also not in favor of giving an extra, what it looks to me, at least for the back of the envelope, an extra 13 or 14 million dollars.
Absolutely. Happy to show you that.
Take your inflation, give me your best guess of the inflation, but we've taken the overtime out. I would like to see, if we're going to put the 10 people in, that the overtime truly does get the bang for the buck that you're telling us we're going to get.
Yeah, because you're including the overtime, the PERS, and all those components, and I have all that information I can send you.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Simon?
Just a follow-up question, not to the judge, about, you talked to, I'm sorry, what's your first name?
Brandon.
Or Brandon. You spoke to implementing flex time and things that are going to attract and retain your COs, but I understood that was already in place and it was actually set aside in the near past, that you did have that. And you're putting it back into practice, flex time, scheduling, flexibility?
So I don't know, Your Honor, how far down this path I want to go as well because of the outstanding.
Well, that's not litigation. I'm asking you a simple question. Did you have that before and now you don't?
That is a component of the.
How are we supposed to talk about a budget, to do things that were already in place before, taken down, and now we need to come back and compensate to get us back to where we were? This is difficult for me to sit here and assess things when things were in place before, things fell apart to some extent, and now you're putting it back together and telling us we need money now to solve this. It's a rhetorical question, nobody answer, I asked the question, but this is going to be a difficult budget process for me when I'm looking at, getting back to where we were and putting money at it, throwing money at this, and you're telling us, well, this is what we need, when you had this before to some extent. And you took away scheduling flexibility, you took away, not you, but somehow it's not there anymore. I don't know if we need an executive session, if this involves litigation, I'm not sure what we need, but I'm just saying that if my questions can't be answered, I'm not comfortable with this discussion of more money. That's all I'm going to say as one council person.
Okay. So, Your Honor, a couple more questions. I'm going to try to help pull this together. You said that you had about 64 vacancies at the time that the administration did the snapshot, and now you have 55. So am I correct that you have more staff? You have more staff now than at the time when the administration took the snapshot?
Correct.
Okay. And regarding the overtime, is there currently $0 for overtime in the budget proposal that we have, or is it some but not the whole 2 million?
$0. They took the snapshot from that time and then they actually backed it out. So they actually had it in there when they captured the 13th pay, and then they backed it out.
Okay. And regarding the piece about creating greater flexibility for the staff in scheduling, if you create greater flexibility in staff on scheduling, does that run counter to your desires to reduce overtime? Does that interfere with the reduction of overtime?
It is, the strategy is that with the additional personnel in place, again, the currently allocated positions, if there is so much as a single vacancy, unless there is already an above adequate staffing pattern in place, like we're already exceeding the legally required minimums, we must replace with overtime. That's the threshold at which the positions have always been allocated. So almost every absence results in the use of overtime presently. If we give rise to the argument that greater flexibility will encourage people to have greater attendance, then perhaps that will have a positive impact, and that is a strategy that we're looking for, but also just the general improvement in staffing levels overall with the ask for the additional 10 officers.
Okay, so, Your Honor, the purpose of these hearings is to identify problems with the proposed budget and consider how to deal with them. And I prefer to deal in explicit communications that are clear and tangible, as opposed to not quite so clear. So my question is are you requesting that we amend this budget to provide the sufficient dollars for the juvenile court to run without your being certain of having to come back from time to time?
That would be my preference.
So what I'd like to request, and I've heard it from several of my colleagues, but I want to enunciate it more specifically. I'd like you to send us a memo with a specific dollar amount proposal in terms of additional dollars for 22 and 23, and the specific itemization of what those dollars would be used for, so that we know how much of it is for personnel, how much of it is for overtime, how much of it is for additional food and contractual expenses, and you know, so that we know how much is requested and what specifically it's for. And we'd like to have that no later than 1 week from today. Okay, we will take your request, and we will consider it as part of our budget process. And Councilman Tron is next.
Just to reiterate on your point, with specificity, when you say how much for head count, tell us what the head count is. You told us today it's 10. You told us overtime was probably $1 million. And then give us a percentage of what your guess is as far as the operating cost. I mean, obviously, no one knows that one. But if you guess at 12% and it comes in at 18, we're not going to be shocked. If you guess at 18 and it comes in at 12, we would expect you're watching the taxpayers' dollars on the flip side, too. Thank you.
Mr.
Chairman.
And when you send us the estimate, I would also like you to give us some indication of whether your estimate assumes that every position that you're requesting is going to be filled as of January 1st, 2022, and is going to remain filled throughout the process, or whether your budget numbers include some allowance for the fact that there's going to be some in and out flow, and that you're not always going to be at full staff.
Do that.
Okay. Councilman Tuma.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is directed more in general to any of the departments coming forward before council in the future. If as part of your budget, you currently do not have amounts allotted for overhead or operations for your department, council wants those, I want those amounts in the budget, and we can decide whether or not we provide funding for that. To me, and I hate to agree so much with Councilman Gallagher, but I do. I mean, I have to agree with him in this instance. That to me is not a way of doing budgeting. You budget, you come with what you think you need, and we take it from there. It's not, we need this, but we're not going to include this, and we want to come back later. It just historically doesn't work like that. And I understand with the administration, with the hiring personnel, we might have a differentiation of opinion on that. There are actually some council members who might agree with that. But when it comes to overhead and costs and departmental things that are necessary to run your department, to make things work and to make things safe for people, you can't cut corners on stuff like that. And it's just, any departments out there moving forward, I want the full amount, and then we'll say, hey, you don't need that. Let us talk about that. But it seems like we're just going to be doing this for every department that comes forward, and it puts you folks in a bad position as trying to run these departments. I just don't think it's a good way of doing budgeting, but that's just my 2 cents.
Okay, Your Honor, thank you very much for coming in. I think we had a very good discussion and came away with a better understanding of what the needs and issues are regarding your budget, and that's our purpose. So thank you very much, and we look forward to your further information on what your specific needs are. Okay, next we have Domestic Relations Division, the Honorable Leslie Ann Calabrese.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Council President, members of the Juvenile Court. The work that they do is imperative to this community.
Okay, thank you very much. And
No questions?
I just thank you for your presentation. I'm going to ask my colleagues whether there's any questions in a moment, but I first wanted to point out to my colleagues that there is on our desk we have a little more detailed presentation, which the judge chose not to present in person, but we have it for you to review. So with that, I will ask my colleagues for any questions. Council President Jones is first.
Thank you, Judge. All right. Well, I hear you say you accept the budget as presented. It's sufficient. Tell me briefly, though, how has your budget changed? Was it reduced? Did it stay the same? What changes were made to your budget?
There were 2 vacant positions that I accepted that we weren't going to fill them. The unfortunate matter is being in the old courthouse. We have a physical space limitation, and so that's why not filling those 2 positions is perfectly acceptable to the court. And we've managed to do a lot of things with the Domestic Relations Court with the budget that we've had. And I'm very proud of the work that we do.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Conwell.
Sorry, Angie, I thought about you. Any cases or during the pandemic that went up, I was hearing that courts were held at different places and all that. During the pandemic, did it add any additional cost to the, I mean, I know you're saying you're great with your budget, but I just, I know the pandemic.
We did get a technology grant, so we were able to do Zoom rather quickly. So that, and that's really helped the people of Cuyahoga County. We still do Zoom, so that you don't have to pay for parking, lawyers don't, litigants don't. So we managed through COVID to work very well. Obviously, domestic violence went up during COVID, and we have noticed now that divorces are going back up. I assume that's because people spent so much time together that they now have decided it's time to move on, so.
Okay, so in terms of the cases going up and things of that nature, what was the technology grant that you got, and who funded that? Was that an outside source?
Was it the Supreme Court? The Ohio Supreme Court funded that, and we were able to get Zoom up and running. So we've been doing Zoom probably since April of, I know I have to ask my court administrator, since about April of 2020. So we were like on the cutting edge of the Zoom hearings.
Okay, so everything is good.
I'm
Thank you.
going to break in just a minute just to note that Vice President Stevens is now present. Anything further, Ms. Conwell? And Ms. Simon is next.
Good afternoon, Judge. Good to see you.
Nice to see you.
Question just about you're just changing the department, the name of Navigation Department Help Center to Navigation Services Help Center, and that appears to, because you're merging departments, what departments will be cross-training to work at the Service Help Center?
So right now it's enforcement services and the people that are in the help center. So what we've decided is it prevents burnout of our employees if everyone's cross-trained. And also we want to help the litigants from the beginning and then past when they're post-decree, like with QDOs and things like that. So we want to expand our services to help the pro se population that we deal with. So but it does help burnout with our employees when they're dealing with entirely pro ses, and then we have a department that deals with attorneys. So we prefer to have everyone cross-train, and that gives everyone a broader base of knowledge that works for the court.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate your coming in.
Thank you, everyone.
And next on our agenda, we have the Probate Division, the Honorable Anthony J. Russo. And again, we have written testimony in front of us.
Council President Jones, Chairman Miller, and members of council, I'm Judge Anthony Russo. I'm the presiding and administrative judge of the probate court. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I'm submitting my remarks for the record, but in the interest of saving time, I won't repeat them now. The probate court's pleased to accept the 2022-23 budget being recommended by OBM and the county executive, and we respectfully request that you approve that. I'd like to thank Director Perfiduitz and Analyst Tiffany Sebastian for the professionalism and cooperation that they've extended to myself and my staff regarding this matter. I also want to thank Mr. Chuck Cavano for his help and advice over the years, and I found out he's retiring today, so I wanted to wish him well. In closing, I just want to let the council know that I fully support Judge Tom O'Malley and the Juvenile Court in regards to their reasonable and necessary budget requests for the next biennium. I want to thank you for your time today. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer them for you. If not, please have a pleasant afternoon.
Your Honor, thank you very much for your brevity and presentation and support for your budget. And we're going to go to my colleagues, and the council president is first.
I actually did not have a comment.
You're good. Okay, anyone else? Okay, you're going to get off easy. Thank you very much.
That's the way I like it.
Okay, and next we have the Court of Appeals, 8th District Appellate Court, the Honorable Mary J. Boyle.
All right, good afternoon, Council President, Council. I am Mary Jane Boyle, the Administrative and Presiding Judge of the 8th District Court of Appeals.
And Your Honor, I don't think we have your testimony, so could you get a copy of your testimony and send it to the clerk so she can distribute to all the council?
Will do.
Thank you.
I appreciate the opportunity to meet with County Council today on behalf of the court. As you will recall, unlike the case with the other courts here today, the county does not fund the Court of Appeals personal budget, which is supplied instead through the state of Ohio. The county, however, is responsible for funding the other expenses of our court for purposes of operations. We want to thank the county executive, the chief of staff, the county fiscal officer, and the fiscal director, as well as our OBM analysts for working with us on our 2022 and 2023 budget. We appreciate all the work that went into creating and supplying our proposed budget, as well as the commitment from the county executive, the chief of staff, and the fiscal officers to work with us over the next 2 years to resolve any budget issues that may occur. In both 2020 and 2021, we obtained several grants through the Ohio Supreme Court. One supported a mid-year and unbudgeted for mandate to record our oral arguments. The county assisted us in wiring our courtrooms, and the Supreme Court gave us technology grants to purchase the equipment to do so, because we are mandated to do that as of September 1st of 2021. The other grants help facilitate the continuing of our operations when we went remote and that we were impacted by the pandemic. We were able to do this to accomplish this goal without seeking additional funding from the county. We accept the proposed budget for 2022 and 2023. No changes from the other two-year budget to this year two-year budget. We also fully support Judge O'Malley in the juvenile court with their budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And are there any questions for Judge Boyle? Okay, you also get
Thank
off
you.
easy. Thank you very much. And next, we are going to go to the Office of the Prosecuting Attorney, the Honorable Michael C. O'Malley.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the County Council. My name is Michael O'Malley. I'm your Cuyahoga County Prosecutor. I think you have my thoughts and beliefs contained within the letters that we had sent to you last week. But in a nutshell, as you can see from the letters, I believe it was back in April, we had sent our letter to the county executive regarding our budget. And as you know from history, that we run a very tight operation at the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's budget, at Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's office. We historically do return money to the general fund. I don't pay my people $150, $160, $170, $180, $190, $200,000 and ad infinitum. We don't just hire anyone. We make sure we hire people who are qualified and well-suited to the functions that we need. And I sent that letter back in April that we would not accept having our employees cut or having to go through another elected official to hire our employees. And I think it's a further consolidation of the power within the office of the county executive. I think it takes away from the independence of my office as a fellow elected official. I know, and I have been told, we run a very efficient, a very professional operation, and we continue to do so. But I will not cede any of the authority of my office. I've been involved in budgets for decades. I've never seen a budget where it's proposed that you take out the employees you need and just go to the budget that we will give you. And it's a bad precedent to begin that in this particular county, especially in light of the tragedies that we have seen where we try to operate the county at a very slim mode. I think it's critical for this council to fund all the operations as you see fit, to hire and staff for and budget for the employees that you, as the oversight, we are all in separate branches of government. You are not in the executive branch, you're in the legislative branch. But you need to ensure that when you're funding these budgets, that you do so that the individuals who are responsible for those government functions can do so in a way that meets the needs of those particular divisions. And I would tell you, the budget we have put forth, I believe, meets the needs of what I need in my particular office, and I will certainly answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, and I'll turn it over to my colleagues, and the council president is first.
Prosecutor O'Malley, how has your budget been reduced? By what dollar amount?
Well, as you can see from the letter, there were things that this council has passed, first of all, that you have passed that we have requirements, whether it's the, get into the details, we have particular contracts that were not funded for our case management system, which is obviously critical. Council has also put money aside for our, we have an increase in the Microsoft contract. We also have, as you know, you funded for expert witnesses and outside counsel that handle our critically important civil cases that are pending against Cuyahoga County. Those are things that this council has already passed legislation on that were not budgeted. And then the remainder, I believe, is from, if you look from our personnel office, our personal services item, as you can see from page 2 of the letter dated October 27th. Again, outside counsel, we have the personal services outside counsel that you've already approved for 2022 wasn't included. We have the expert witnesses that council approved for 2021. We have a contract for Point Blank that you've approved for 2022 and 120,000. And additional items are pending removal. Again, as you know from your budget analysts, we hire who we need, when we need them, and this is our request for this particular budget period. I don't know who will be in the executive's office in 2023. I can't be certain that the commitments that were proposed to me, that certainly just call up and we will give you what we need. I don't know that the next executive or if this current executive is reelected will maintain that commitment. I do know that budgeting goes through the council. I know I've stated for 6 months now what my need is, and I thought it was clear.
Okay, so vacancies and previously approved contracts. Your budget has been reduced by those basic 2 elements.
Pardon me?
Vacancies, and the previously approved contracts. Your budget has been reduced in those 2 areas.
Correct.
Okay. Were these vacancies, were those the traditional ones that maybe had not been filled, or?
Well, you know what, if you saw last year, we had a great deal of money returned because during the pandemic, we were mostly working from home. Myself, my supervisors, certainly we had critical support staff that would rotate, but I'm of the mindset that we run a lean ship. And so I wasn't hiring individuals when I didn't think the need was there because we were working from home. Additionally, as I indicated previously, for instance, Dave Lambert has had a vacancy in civil. Dave advertises every week. Dave will not hire somebody until he has somebody who meets the qualifications, which is to represent this county and have experience representing this county in all the civil litigation we have. So Dave will interview people and interview people and interview people, but he's not going to just hire anyone. He's only going to hire somebody that fits the bill. And even then, it's hard to do because it's finding somebody who fits the bill that is willing to take the reduced wages that most in-county employees take. So that's an example of the situation.
All right, thank you.
Anything else? Ms. Baker?
Just to understand, we understand the pandemic years of 2020, but how does this compare to your 2019 when you were full staff? And how did those vacancies look then compared to what you're saying is lacking now?
Well, I would say we're always going to carry vacancies. I can tell you, since I became prosecutor, I think we've hired probably in the vicinity of 80 prosecutors, 90 prosecutors. We're hoping that because of the generosity of this county council, which has given us more money to make our people more competitive so they're not stolen weekly, that we're going to see a reduction in attrition. So the office has historically had vacancies. But for instance, I lost 2 critical people who are in my homicide unit, and I don't have to tell anybody here that homicides have been up in Cuyahoga County. And I lost those 2 individuals, Max Martin, Brian Radigan, who were 8, 10-year homicide prosecutors for the office. And it illuminated the reality that even though we have done well to bring, and what my goal was really to try to bring the bottom up, because we had people who were making in the 30s who had families. And I have tried to do my best, and I just had this discussion with one of my employees today, that it was critical for me to bring the bottom up because people have to eat, they have to feed their families, they have basic sustenance needs that have to be met. But at the same time, I have to be cognizant. Dave is having trouble hiring somebody as a civil prosecutor to represent the county in all these lawsuits at $90,000 a year. I have to take that into reality. So, and I'm having difficulty keeping homicide prosecutors who are making $100,000 a year because they can go to the defense bar and make double that. And I'm not suggesting that the county will ever pay those type of wages to employees in my office, at least not in my lifetime. But I do have to accept the fact that if this county wants to continue to want the best representation, both for the victims of crime and for the officers of this county who are subject to lawsuits on what seems to be a weekly basis, that we do have to do our best to pay them as well as we can.
Okay, follow.
Yes, you may.
So in your letter of October 27th, you say here vacant positions as of the 21st pay of 2021 are as follows. And you've got you have 19 positions which are vacant that were not included in this budget. And,
Correct.
okay, so of those 19, are those positions over the next 2 years, positions that you think you will fill?
Absolutely.
They are not just positions that have been there, always been there. It's time to get them off the books because it's just taking up space of money that will probably never be used.
No, it is our intention and our goal to fill them. But also acknowledging the fact as we're filling them, I don't think we have it as bad as perhaps the juvenile court in hiring their corrections officers, or God forbid, the county sheriff's department in hiring and with the comings and goings within their CO staff. But we do have people who leave fairly regularly, but I do believe it's somewhat slowed down. It is my intention to, and is my goal to hire those positions. But if I don't, I will do what I do every year, which is to return the money back to the general fund. And it's funny because I did have a discussion with the executive on this issue within the last week. And I expressed my displeasure as to why I sat on Cleveland City Council like Councilman Miller had. We left some independence, whether it was the police department, whether it was the water department, whether it was the sewer department, whether it was Cleveland Public Power, whether it was the streets division, whether it was the parks division. We left discretion within the administration and those offices to meet that need. The county council, at least, or in the city council in that case, didn't feel like getting in nor should we get in the day-to-day operations, overseeing the day-to-day operations of a particular unit. But we realized that if we wanted our parklands cut, if we wanted our streets plowed, that we had to give them the money to do that. It wasn't our position to run the offices, but we had to make sure we funded them to a level that our citizens had the services that they deserved. I don't know how we came about this, but I did discuss it with the executive, and I said, why are you taking away my vacancies when I need them? And it was told to me because we don't want to cut any programs. So then I said, we don't want to cut any programs and I need these positions and I'm going to come to you to get them filled. Where are you going to get the money to fill them if you're going to cut the programs? And he says, well, we got a big surplus. So then I did it was a complete circle, is that then if you got a surplus, fund the programs and leave my vacancies alone.
If I may follow on that point to finish.
Yes, you may.
So you feel that you will, without much doubt, be back next year asking to fill some of these vacancies if it is not in this budget?
Some of them are advertised as we speak. As I indicated, Dave is constantly advertising for civil positions, so they're advertised as we speak. Do we need the level of another hurdle? Do I need the level of another hurdle? Do I have to call the executive's office, for me, a fellow elected official, to hire a civil attorney to represent you? I think it's nuts.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we have Councilwoman Conwell followed by Gallagher.
Through the chair,
And
too.
we have more. Please proceed.
Through the chair to Prosecutor O'Malley, I was just looking at your letter, and you were saying that if you could expand a little bit, there's an expected decrease in the special revenue funding because the DTAC Hardest Hit Funds project ended.
That's the hardest hit funds that council had set aside money for.
Right.
So that program it's finished.
Heavily subsidized. My name is Jim Ginley. I work for the county prosecutor in the fiscal department. It is now defunct. It was heavily subsidized by the general fund to the tune of maybe $800 or $1 million a year. We have.
Mr. Ginley, can you speak into the microphone, please?
Of course. Should I repeat what I just said?
Yes, please.
Okay. My name is Jim Ginley. I work for the Fiscal Department in the Prosecutor's Office. The hardest hit funds is no longer in existence.
Do you want to explain to them what?
Yeah, it was trying to target properties that were like purchased by the land bank or demolished, that were eyesores and for deteriorating neighborhoods and everything else. That activity, if it still exists, is being absorbed by regular DTAC, which is a sustaining fund by itself. We're not asking for additional money in that fund. We have enough in there. That's the elimination.
Thank you.
Okay, we have Councilman Gallagher, followed by Vice President Stevens and Councilwoman Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. I think we're hearing from the head of the department that represents us in these unfortunate situations regarding the delicate areas of the jail, HHS, and so on. And we're being told directly that there's a need that hasn't been met. I don't know how much more clear it needs to be made, so I'll leave it at that and rest my case with my concerns as far as positions go. Mr. O'Malley, you said something today that has not been set yet, but I thought that it was being done, is that putting aside these openings is so that we don't cut programming. We have added programming outside the four corners of our directive, of our law, the charter, time and time and time again. And I think it's time, and maybe now is the time, that we look ourselves in the mirror and realize that we have missions within this county. And the missions mostly are with HHS and safety and the courts, providing safety for our citizens and those lesser of us that are in most need. And if we have to cut certain pet projects of political people to fund the necessary needs of those that are our core mission, then we need to start doing that. And to be taking out and playing games with a budget, which I consider this to be, at the expense of those doing the job for us is ridiculous. So I think maybe we need to have a big further discussion on some of these outside the four corners of our law, of our charter. You know, we're talking about adding money for, which I was all for years ago, for the college of our employees. Previous administration didn't want to talk about it, wanted to go a different way. I think it's a great idea, but it's not a great idea if we're looking at millions of dollars in underfunded positions within the county. I think we need to take a closer look at that.
Vice President Stevens, followed by Simon and President Jones.
I tend to agree with my colleague that one of our major responsibilities as county government is a safety net for our citizens. And the prosecutor's office is part of that safety net to protect those who have been violated by other people, but also to be proactive in the protection of this organization as a whole. So while I'm not an attorney, I can think like one on occasion. So
Council member, can you speak louder to the
Yes,
microphone?
obviously I can.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at a series of budget documents from the chair to the prosecutor, and I see that the recommended budget by the executive's office was $34,791,000, and you'd like to see it be in the neighborhood of $41 to $42 million. Am I understanding that correctly? Yes, I guess you need to bring your budget guy
Yes.
back up.
I just knew it was in 2022, we were 3 million under, and 2023, 2.9 million under.
Correct. The numbers supplied by OBM show what they're calling the adopted budget and the base budget compared to what we had requested. And in the letter that Prosecutor O'Malley sent, we do itemize those pieces.
Right,
and
so I did a
parts.
quick summary. You've got another $6 million you might need to add?
Correct. About 3.1 for 2022, plus another 602,000 plus another 3. Yeah, it's about 4, about, it's over 4 on this list here.
Okay, so 4 to what? The base number is 34, is that correct?
The base
Can you look at the
number-
budget that the administrator, I mean, the
Right, for the
executive-
general fund, when, it's confusing when you put the
Yeah, I'm seeing
delinquent
too many
tax in
different
there, but
things.
yeah. OBM came up with 2021 adopted budget, and then when 2022 base is 43, and what we're asking for are all the itemized pieces on the letter from last week.
So if you take 43 and add 4 to it,
Right.
we're talking about
Pretty much.
47?
Pretty much.
Yeah, and I just did a quick addition. 820,000 of that is for already contracts that this council has approved.
Correct.
I want to have a clear picture of what you really need aggregately, so we know in essence what we're voting on. Does that sound reasonable to you?
Sure. You want me to itemize it here? I'll talk about each item.
So,
Okay.
I think you've outlined what they are, but I wanted to make sure that we were all looking at similar bottom line numbers. Because if we don't understand the same thing, we don't vote for the real request you're making to us.
Right. Your assumption is correct, what you're saying.
Okay. And because there are like 3 charts in front of me on 3 different sets of documents.
Exactly. On Mike's letter from last week, on page 2, those items are spelled out for each budget. General
It
office
didn't have
and
the
child
base
support.
number.
Right, it did not. It
Okay.
correlated to just the sheet.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we have Councilwoman Simon, followed by President Jones and Councilman Tron.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. To the prosecutor or budget analyst. I just want to drill down on personnel services that I'm looking at your letter with the additional money you're requesting and it's to include the vacant positions, which is clear, and parity. Are we looking at parity with private sector, with, what is the parity? Are we looking at raises within these
What the
numbers?
parity study originally was to look at other county employees and what they were making. For instance, your paralegals in the law department were making 50, mine were making 41, and had been here for 15 years. Those type of things. What the civil staff in the law department was making as compared to what my civil staff was making. That was the parity.
Okay, so,
I'm not going complete parity because I think my philosophy is that and some of my supervisors will probably be unhappy, but I do think that if you work for government, you're not getting private sector wages. So you shouldn't be getting, so I try to keep it within an umbrella of sanity.
okay, I understand, thank you. So this would include perhaps some increase as well as to include the vacant positions?
Correct. For instance, if Dave's telling me, Mike, I've had a position advertised for 6 months and I've interviewed 30 people for civil and we're not finding the person we need, then I've got to look, what's the solution? And so the solution inevitably, because he's telling me, Mike, they won't come here for 90 grand. Then I have to accept that as a reality because we're going to continue. And you know what part of my issue is, Councilwoman, is that I've also got to look long-term. Because, as you know, people are leaving, they're aging. We had a few retirements in civil last year. I've got another one coming this year. And it's the same way within all my divisions. So you're trying to bring some fresh new blood in who've got talent, but also with the understanding that you're going to have some who leave that may be in their prime, but you're also having some who leave that are in retirement status. But we've got to continue to be competitive so that I can have people who can professionally represent this county in all the things that we do, whether it's the Board of Elections or handling a lawsuit over at the federal court.
Thank you.
Council President Jones is next, followed by Councilman Tron.
No, I just wanted to make a point. As we've been discussing, I heard it said that we could potentially take from one program to fund another program. The administration has said from the start of these hearings that they have presented a balanced budget. I just want, obviously, our colleagues to know that although they presented a balanced budget, it doesn't stop us from doing what we believe we ought to do. That is our role. What ought we to do? And whether it's been balanced or not, we are still capable of doing our job, finding dollars to spend if necessary. We have a healthy reserve, and I'm not saying you, in no way would I ever say we spend every penny of it. We have at least $160 million, but it is certainly possible for us to draw from those reserves to create a budget. That doesn't mean we have to cancel anything the administration or we have put forward, and we can still add and respond as appropriate to these requests without concern that there's been presented a balanced budget that we cannot shake up. Okay, I just wanted that to be clear. I'll say this: the executive I heard the middle of last week announced a rent program. I don't know the details, but he made a public announcement of it, and potential dollars for first and last month. Have not heard from it officially, just what I heard, like the public has heard. But it is not within this budget. So that means if he follows through on announcement that he made last week, then he would unbalance the budget. Okay? So I just want to throw that out there so that we continue to make sure we know what we are capable and responsible for doing.
And again, you have to let administrators, and I am the administrator of the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor's Office, have the ability to hire swiftly and to know with certainty that you have the authority, which you should, within the authority of this elected office, to quickly respond and manage your office professionally. I mean, if they came to you, if the executive came to you and said, you had Joe Nani leave or Brendan Doyle leave and said, we're not going to fund it, but when you need a person, come to us. I think it's unacceptable. I think we have to let, whether it's the sheriff, whether it's the prosecutor, whether it's the council, you have to give them the ability to quickly manage their office so that they can do so professionally and in a way that's going to be in the best interest of both the citizens and the people that they have to deal with on a daily basis.
Councilman Tron.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I see this as breaking down into three categories, at least if I'm understanding it correctly. One is just completely ridiculous that we're even here talking about it. We've already approved 3 of these items. The county executive has already signed off on these. Why would they even be consideration of being excluded, unless I'm missing something? How did that happen? I mean, how do we sit here as a body, approve it, recognize it, and it's already a done deal, and you've probably already contracted with the outside parties, have you not?
Right,
In
we
some
have
cases, we
resolutions, yeah. We have
Yeah, you got resolutions, we've already acted? What's that?
I don't know about the expert witnesses for the lawsuits and the outside counsel. I think probably outside counsel, but expert witnesses, we get them as we need them. But certainly the point blank contract that you approved,
Yeah, I'm reading, you got 3 of them we've already
the
approved.
outside counsel you approved, so that's already hired. Yes.
Yeah, there is some changes post-development of the budget with resolutions that are kind of still in the process for the expert witnesses, but those have to be adjusted for and accounted for.
Unless those cases have settled, we're still going to need the expert witnesses, are we not?
And they keep coming.
Yeah, my guess is it's not going to be I think it's really an affront that the county executive would take the 3 things out that we've already approved. This body's already approved the money. I mean, and we already know that the litigation is going on. We already knew the expert witnesses. Unless you come in and say, we've settled the case, we don't need the expert witnesses, that's a different discussion, but that's not weird. You're not here telling us that.
No.
Okay, so then that's one item that I have no understanding why on the earth the county executive would take those out. Parity, that's an element that I think you need to really come up and tell us what is parity out of this, because the majority of this money is in the salaries and parity.
Right.
What's parity and what's salaries? Is it 20%, 50% of?
Well, in 2022, the 3.1 million that we're asking for in general office.
Mr. Kinley, can you please speak into the microphone?
In 2022, that 3,139,125, about approximately 1.4 million of that is the parity.
Okay,
And
so.
keep in mind, the 15th pay has already happened. We implemented another wave of parity that was not included in the 12th pay projection, so it's also excluded. And we're not done with the parity either.
So what Jim is saying is the raises had been given to try to bring them up, for instance, civil up to 90. So that's given, but because they based the budget on whatever pay, in spite of the fact that we may have given it a pay later or 2 pays later, they still went with the budget from the initial.
They use old numbers without recognizing that we've already improved the parity.
Correct.
A portion of it, yes, and we still have more parity to go.
Okay, so 1.7 is what you're asking for as far as new position vacancies. If I'm just doing your delta on that, you got.
Yeah, if it's rounding to 1.4, 1.5 for the parity part, and then for general office, but also if you look farther down in child support, we're looking for 276,000. That was also cut. That's a general fund contract that we're reimbursed, the 4D money.
I just back of the envelope used your 40% that you gave me. So that's, so 40% of your salary number is parity. So the rest of it is new people, new personnel.
Well, vacancy filling.
Okay, is the person here today working?
No, they're not, but they're
Okay,
filling
tomorrow, if you fill those slots, will they be new people that are being, not new to the slot, but new to your office?
Yes.
You can give them an assignment tomorrow that you couldn't give because there's nobody here today. So, all right, so roughly 17 people, roughly, if you're doing your $100,000 bucks, spice. And I think you said 19? Okay, all right. You told this body that those 17 or 19 slots will be filled. Is that correct?
Yes.
Assuming you got some bids out
Assuming
there.
everything goes smoothly, it's our intention to hire those people. Now, obviously, we'll have probably some people leave, maybe hopefully not too many, but some will leave. But it's our intention to hire them. And the difference between the date of hire and what we don't use, we'll return back to the general fund.
I'm not worried about that, but if you have a fully operating ship, you need 19 more people.
Correct.
Okay, all right. And is that because those 19 people have left or because of the workload has increased or?
No, they're vacant positions where somebody used to be there that we haven't hired yet.
Because they've left or because?
Because they've left.
This body has had a number of people take that microphone and say, we had 19 slots, but we've never filled those 19 slots. We haven't filled them for the last umpteen number of years. Are you telling us that that those 19 slots have never been filled?
They have been filled and we're trying to fill them.
That's a different answer than what the other people have taken that microphone for.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's why when we say we want to give us a universal solution, we can't be any better off if we give a universal solution to you folks than if we specifically answer your requests, and the juvenile justice is a different request, and we get them nailed exactly what you need. I have no problem with getting you your 19 people. If you were hiring them before, they're working there, and our workload requires that.
Correct.
But if you're also telling me, if you also would tell me that, we haven't had those 19 people for the last 5 years or 10 years, that's not the same question that we are answering.
And that's not the case.
Thank you.
So, couple of specific questions. Is there money for cost of living in your budget, and does there need to be, or do the parity increases cover it so that cost of living is not required?
Cost of living has been incorporated.
The cost of living has been incorporated. Fran, our fiscal officer, did a very detailed projection of the 21st pay, and what Mike is asking for is the reinstatement of the approved budget we had for 2021 plus the COLA implications. That's how we back into that number. So what we're asking for is included.
I'm sorry, I asked a fuzzy question. Let me restate it. In the budget that we currently have in front of us, as submitted by the county executive, does that budget include money for cost of living?
Yes, OBM incorporated that into the small amount of the base that didn't include vacancies or parity, yes.
Okay.
And pay.
And the other...
Yeah, with the parity stuff from the 15th pay.
The other question that I have, and you can give it to me now if you can do it, or you can give it to me later if you have to get back to me, but of the $1.4 million that's for parity in what you've requested, how much of that $1.4 million is simply to continue raises that have already been granted through the current budget cycle, and how much of that would be to cover parity increases that you have planned but have not yet been provided?
If I think I understand the question, we plan on doing another parity as we size up our work staff.
The 1.4 is in addition to unimplemented parity. Because you have to look at the 1.4 as the difference between the base that was given to us and the base that we're asking for. It includes that 15th pay implications, which is a few, maybe $300,000 or $400,000 annualized.
Okay, hold on a minute. Let's start over. We're not getting there. As I understand your previous testimony, and correct me if I state this wrong, but as I understood what you said before, of the $1.4 million in parity increases, my understanding was that part of it was to simply continue parity increases that you granted after the snapshot was taken and that are not included in the budget.
Yeah, so
And part of it is to pay for parity increases that have not yet been provided, but you're planning to provide. And I would like to get a breakdown of how much of the 1.4 million is for the former and how much is for the latter.
Well, all of the 1.4 has been for parity, correct?
Yeah, that's all parity, but
Mr. Ginley in the microphone.
Miller is asking about the 12th pay development. The 12th pay did not have the parity from the already implemented portion, which is a small portion. I'll get that number for you. I'll break down the 1.4 and what part of it has already been implemented that's sort of obligated in the payroll. That's what you're asking.
That's what I'm asking, exactly.
Yeah, I can get you that.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Sweeney.
Councilman Sweeney in the microphone, please.
Microphone on. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, to our prosecutor, thank you for the detailed breakdown. That was very helpful. When the county government got changed, it was county executive, 11 council members, and specifically a county prosecutor elected. So talking about the people of Cuyahoga County want an independent entity that's going to do their job as a prosecutor. And that's all you're asking for right now. And
Correct.
Yeah.
I don't think I should have to go to another office holder to ask him if it's okay if I hire somebody. I think I should get my budget from this body and exercise the duties of my office to the best of my ability.
And I think that's what the will of the people of the Cuyahoga County said when they passed the county charter, is the way they did. Through the chair to the prosecutor, you said you're recognized as a well-run prosecutor's office, which I fully agree. And you're recognized as a very fiscally responsible prosecutor's office under your leadership. But those two facts and the ability to be independent, I think we should give you what you want to be able to represent all entities, including us. And those are my comments, very specific towards the end of this hearing.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the specific information that you've provided. We'll take it under advisement, and we're now going to take a 15-minute break, and we will come back at 3:15. Thank you very much, everybody. The committee of the whole will please come back to order. And I'm going to pull a Baker Mayfield. I'm going to call an audible. I've had some council members saying that they had to leave early, and we need to make sure that we have 6 votes to pass the economic development legislation. So I am passing the gavel over to Councilman Schwan to conduct that portion of the meeting.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having watched yesterday's game, we don't want to pull that kind of a Baker Mayfield out there. Oh, that was excruciating, yes. He's going to win the other 9 left, I'm sure, out there. So with that, could we please read the item into the record for us?
Yes, Resolution 2021-0246, authorizing contract number 1904 with Fund for Our Economic Future of Northeast Ohio as fiscal agent in the amount not to exceed $1,450,000 to support workforce innovation and coordination in healthcare, manufacturing, information technology, and hospital sectors in connection with the Workforce Connect Development Program. It's for the period January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2024.
And Madam Chair, Madam Clerk, I don't ordinarily correct the reading of one word, but this word is very important. It's hospitality sectors.
Oh, thank you.
That's okay, only because it's a whole big sector of economics within here. So is there somebody here to speak on this? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of council. Paul Hertig with the Department of Development, and with me is Kathy Belk from the Deaconess Foundation, who's also the chair of the Workforce Funders Group. We had prepared a 90-minute presentation with 8 speakers, and when we realized that we were going to be heard in the Committee of the Whole in the middle of budget hearings, we thought it would probably be wise to let everyone know we are very happy and delighted to give that full presentation at another time. We'll work with Councilman Schwan, at his convenience, a meeting, the Economic Development Committee, to give that full presentation. So I'll give the Reader's Digest condensed version today. 3 years ago, Cuyahoga County decided to spend $1 million from our Economic Development Fund to support what at the time was a new idea for us, which was to support workforce sector partnerships. Now, workforce has been an issue we've been wrestling with for quite some time. The shortages of talent in some of our key sectors are known, and they've been afflicting us for a while. What was new about this approach was the idea of bringing together actual industry leaders, owners of companies, senior executives of companies, to work together so that they, as the company leaders themselves, would understand and analyze what are the problems that are keeping them from getting the talent they need. And the industry leaders themselves would develop the solutions, supported by the public sector, supported by nonprofits, and then carry out programs along these lines. I'm happy to report that we've had excellent success in each of the sectors. Manufacturing went first in 2019. Healthcare got itself organized early last year in the early stages of the pandemic, and information technology was not far behind, getting itself organized late in 2020. When we give the full report, we will have industry leaders to speak along with some of those that have supported them about the programs that have been developed. In a nutshell, in each industry, the leaders themselves have looked at what it will take to find more people ready, willing, and able to work, and have started doing those things. Manufacturing has piloted an approach to bring in people that are unemployed, in many cases people that have had prison time, and support them in coming back into the industry. It's been very successful. In the healthcare sector, a program to recruit people who have some barriers to employment and put them through a training program to overcome those barriers is ramping up. That's also looking to be quite successful and is growing. And in information technology, the latest to join, they've got a really good pilot going where they've got a number of leading companies saying, we're going to change the way we screen our candidates. We're no longer going to require strictly the 4-year degree and 6 years of experience. We're going to say, let's look at the skills the people have, and let's hire them based on their skills. Now, there's so much more to this. I really don't want to cut short the full presentation, but something's happening in every sector. So when we in the Department of Development were asked, do you want to continue funding this? The answer was yes, we must continue to fund this. We're proposing a modest 10% increase in our base funding. So council members, you did receive a full presentation. There's a budget page in this. And in the budget page, it indicates what we're looking to do is go from the $1 million we provided in the first cycle up to $1.45 million. Now we're doing a modest 10% increase in our base funding. So that's from 1 million to 1.1. We're also adding $350,000 to start to work in the hospitality sector. That's new. And again, in hospitality, if we had David Gilbert here, he would talk your ear off for about half an hour. But essentially, it's going to be the same approach. Working with Destination Cleveland, our tourism organization, with the Fund for Economic Future, we've already started to pull together a group of industry leaders, restaurants, hotels, bars, who in the same way as the other sectors will be working together to figure out what needs to happen so they can get more employees and to start to do those things. So we're very excited about being able to support this new sector. Just to let council know, all of the county's funds will be used to support the sectors themselves, none for overhead. In other words, it'll all be passed through to actually run the programs in the manufacturing, healthcare, information technology, and hospitality sectors, all of the $1.45 million. There's other funding that comes from other sources. Kathy chairs the board that oversees all the funding together, budgets it all, but the county's funding will be used the way I've just said. It will not deviate from that. I think it's best for me to stop here and let you know I'm happy to answer any immediate questions. And if there are none, I'm going to ask Kathy to say just a few words.
Any questions for Paul right now before we go into Kathy from Deaconess? Yes. I saw the first hand over there. Okay, Ms. Baker. And the second hand over here. Yes, thank you.
Just to be clear, Director, the 1.4 million, that's already included with the 10% increase?
So again, we gave 1 million last time, the last 3 years.
Okay.
So the 10% increase would take that up to 1.1. And then by adding $350,000 for hospitality, we come to 1.45 million.
And is that currently in this budget?
It is in the Economic Development Fund. It is well within the balance of the Economic Development Fund.
For 2022 and 2023?
It is, yes.
Mr. Miller?
My questions were the same, basically, about the funding source.
Okay. Do we have some comments from Kathy? And you are still also head of Deaconess too, are you not, as far as the foundation? Yes.
Yes, thank you. Kathy Belk from the Deaconess Foundation. I just want to thank the council for your past support. This $1 million was really transformational, and as you see, has led many other private sector foundations to be supportive. I'll speak for the Deaconess Foundation. We made our commitment to the next 3 years of this initiative at a 17% increase versus what we had done before, because we do find this transformational, making impact, and ready to scale. The other thing that I'll offer that Paul didn't mention is that of the job seekers who now have jobs and have been much more successful in securing them and performing in them, more than half of them are Black or Latinx individuals. And that is a big focus of the work, not only to reach out to those people, but to have workplaces that embrace them and allow them to fulfill their potential. So we're really proud of that work as well. The only other thing I'll add is employers are so involved in this initiative that they are changing their workplaces so that they're more successful at keeping people there. And as we all know, with the challenges right now in having workers participate at companies, the fact that employers are jumping in and participating in that change is what is critical to be successful. So we're really pleased, and I'm very grateful for your attention and your commitment to this initiative.
Kathy, you said as a private funding, you actually did 17%. What does that translate to a dollar?
It's $525,000 over 3 years from the Deaconess Foundation, and that is a really significant portion of our budget. We're a small foundation. We are focused on workforce. This is by far our biggest commitment.
So you're writing a check for almost a third of the same thing that the county did. Thank you. Very, very appreciative. Any other questions in regards to Deaconess or anything? I just want to make one other comment because I have some awareness that I believe that you talked about the second chance individuals, placing about 60 individuals, and it's my understanding is not one single day of recidivism took place out of that group. And if you're going to equate that to dollars, I think my understanding is about $65,000 to keep somebody incarcerated. And if they convert that into those 60 people into a $30,000 job, that means that we almost got a 6-to-1 ratio for the dollars invested. I think that as a business lady over there, you'll take that any day, won't you? Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the minutes, approve this for second reading approval? Do you need any faster than second reading approval? I mean, you'll go through all 3 readings?
Third is fine.
Okay.
So moved. Second
moved?
reading.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This will go for a second reading at the next council meeting. Thank you, Rita.
I didn't know if we were supposed to vote.
What's that? Oh, yeah, no, this is committee
This is committee of the whole.
Oh, yeah, this is committee of the whole. Everybody had to vote. Yeah, here you go, Dale. We actually, that was the problem, is we need 6 people.
Okay, just for, out of abundance of caution, I'm going to ask the clerk to read Resolution 2021-0238 back into the record.
Resolution 2021-0238, adopting the 2020-2022-2023 biennial operating budget and capital improvements program.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is our public defender, Cullen Sweeney. Welcome to the budget hearing.
Good afternoon, Council President Jones, Councilman Miller, Chairman Miller, and the rest of the council. Thank you for having me today. I'm Cullen Sweeney. I'm the new Chief Public Defender for Cuyahoga County. My predecessor, Mark Stanton, retired at the end of last year, and so I started in January. I don't want to take too much time here. I'll just state at the outset that we are happy with the budget as recommended by the executive. But I did want to take a couple minutes to highlight a few things. I think we have a PowerPoint. And again, I will be brief. So I just wanted to highlight at the outset that everything we do at the Public Defender's Office is directed to our mission of representing indigent individuals accused of crimes, both adults and juveniles, and then also parents who are at risk for losing their children. We represent them in children and family service custody cases. And so with that in mind, when I was looking at our budget here, we had a development process that's a little bit different than some of the other agencies. We have, as I'm sure council knows, a Public Defender Commission. And I first present the budget to them. They're bound by the Ohio law to make recommendations regarding our staffing levels. We fully went through the budget process with them. They approved the request that we're making here. And that's the composition of the commission. Just real quickly, I just wanted to highlight the operations breakdown in our office. We have 4 divisions. We handle appellate post-conviction proceedings, felony trial cases, and juvenile proceedings. All 3 of those are funded by the general fund. Our fourth division, which is the Municipal Division, handles all the cases out of the city of Cleveland and municipal court. We contract with the city of Cleveland to provide that representation, but the contract is administered by the county. Through that. One thing that's a bit unique about the Public Defender's Office is much of its funding, as council knows, I'm sure, comes from the state of Ohio through reimbursing local dollars. And as you can see from this graph, there has been an increasing commitment to indigent defense at the state level. Beginning in 2011, it went up to reimbursing at a rate of 85% this last budget cycle. And in the next budget cycle, there was an even larger increase. This is part of a memorandum from Tim Young, who's the state public defender, which highlights that the projected reimbursement for 2022 is 100%, and that's what they're reimbursing at as we speak. They expect it may decrease a little bit to probably around 95% in 2023's fiscal year, in part because some of the investment isn't just to, save local dollars, but it's with the expectation that local governments will increase their investment as well. So if you just look at the recommended budget here, you will see that there is an increase in our budget from from this last budget period. And Chairman Miller had asked some questions about that, and I submitted a letter in response that highlighted, and I think it hopefully explained the additional positions that we had felt were necessary to better represent our clients. And if anybody has any specific questions about those positions or anything, I will happily answer them, but I wasn't going to go through them here. The one other thing that is a significant amount of that increase is, and you heard it from the county prosecutor earlier, a parity adjustment for our staff. And so one of the things that we have built into we have a unionized attorney workforce. One of the things that's built into our collective bargaining agreement is parity with the prosecutor's office. And so while he's fighting for parity, we're also fighting, we're following in his footsteps and fighting for parity for our attorneys as well. And so currently a county prosecutor starts at $66,000. Whereas in our office it's at $62,000. So we're in the middle of negotiations with our union, and we have built into this budget an amount of money that we anticipate will roughly cover the agreement that we will reach that will hopefully bring us into parity with the prosecutor's office. So we're negotiating the CBA right now. Obviously, we don't know a hard dollar figure, but we have a pretty good sense of it. So when we come back before this council for the approval of the CBA for the next 2 years, we'll have a very clear picture of that. One thing I just wanted to highlight just is this trend line that reflects the impact of the reimbursement rate is that this county has made increased commitments to indigent defense, particularly in 2017 when Mark Stanton came before council, and we're asking for some additional commitment here. But nonetheless, the trend line is still such that the actual cost to the county has decreased in terms of the general fund. So with that, I don't have anything further to say, except I do want to thank Tiffany Sebastian and Chuck Cavano and everyone in the fiscal analysts that worked with us on this. The county executive was responsive to our requests, and we would just ask that council consider funding them at the level requested.
Thank you very much for the presentation, and I saw Ms. Simon first, followed by Conwell.
Thank you, Public Defender, for the presentation. I understand for 2 years we have this significant reimbursement from the state. My concern is after 2 years, if the state budget dries up with reimbursement, that the Public Defender will be on top of this and make us aware that might happen as soon as you can come in, so we can make sure that that you're on parity with the prosecutor's office. So I don't want that to dry up and then you're woefully behind with general fund subsidy. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Councilwoman Simon. We get quarterly updates from the state public defender about the demands on their reimbursement budget. We know it's pretty solid for the next 2 years, but this is the highest priority for the state public defender's office. We're hopeful that the state will continue, but if they don't, we will definitely come back to council.
So on that, I would add that as far as our budget is concerned, we'd be at serious risk only for the last 6 months of our biennium, because that would be into the next state budget cycle. Their biennium starts 6 months before ours, but it is something that we should keep a close watch on. Ms. Conwell.
Through the chair to Mr. Sweeney, has it ever been reimbursed at this level before?
No, Councilwoman Conwell, it's never been at this level. In fact, it historically, as you can see from one of the prior slides, it had hovered around 40% for a number of years. The last, I'd say 6 years, there's been a significant increase. And I know this was one of the priorities of the County Commissioners Association, because it does have a big impact on local abilities to fund indigent defense. So it was a priority of the governors and I think the local county commissioners. And the expectation is that it will continue, but obviously there is no guarantees.
And that's across the state, correct?
Correct, yes.
And in terms of the unionized contract, when will you start discussions with that?
We have already started discussions with them. We're very close to reaching an agreement. We have another meeting scheduled this week, and then we will present it to the law department and then to council.
Okay, and their agreement is on the topic of parity, correct?
Yes, it's the full CBA, and there's a few adjustments that are being made other than that. But as with many CBAs, the primary focus is on wages and parity. And we have always had, and in the Ohio Administrative Code, there's a provision that provides for parity between the prosecutor's office and the public defender's office. And recently, every CBA we've had for the last 10 years has incorporated that. So we often will see, well, where's the prosecutor at as far as funding salaries, and then we adjust ours accordingly.
Okay, so I know that through the chair to Mr. Sweeney that you're going on parity. It sounds like you're going on parity based on what the prosecutor and what the law states. Do you kind of agree with the prosecutor's statement regarding, since we're a government entity, paying individuals based on that they work at a government versus the public sector?
Yeah, I think that, I do think starting salaries for an attorney in the 60s is relatively low compared to the private bar. I think most people that go to be prosecutors or public defenders do it because that's where their heart is, less their wallet. There is some security, obviously, in working in government, but I think it's more driven by passion than financial considerations. All the same, people can't, live on passion alone. So in order to compete for the most qualified candidates, we do need to at least fund it at a level that is, sufficient to raise a family and whatnot.
One final question through the chair. Do you have any vacancies that you need to fill?
We do have vacancies. They unlike I think perhaps because of the reimbursement rate, unlike the other agencies, they were not taken out of our budget. So we have 4, technically 5, but one's a grant-funded position, but positions that we are currently advertising for. These were all positions that became vacant in the last few months that have always been filled and that we intend to fill most likely within the year's end. And these positions are within that we're talking about here. These vacancies are within our existing budget, though we are asking for some additional positions for the next biennium.
Okay, Councilman Tron.
This is more of a curiosity question at this point, because when it was 40% reimbursement, it was not, the issue wouldn't have been there. But when you're at 100%, is there parity going the other way too? Because in theory, if there's nothing holding you back, there would nothing constrain you from going above the prosecutor's office either.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that that is a conceivable question. There aren't many, I don't think it's a reality yet, and I think it would be unlikely that we would be able to do it, fund higher than the prosecutor's office. I mean, I don't know that there's any public defender's office probably in the United States that makes more than its prosecutor's office. But at the same time, obviously, we're fiscally responsible. We're not, much like Prosecutor O'Malley is not going to hire someone at $200,000. Neither are we. But I don't know that there's anything that, other than fiscal responsibility, that would keep us. And obviously, council and the PD commission and the county executive all have an oversight role here. So, I mean, if I started, suggesting $50,000 raises, I'm sure somebody would call that into question. But I certainly don't intend to do that. Our contract that we're negotiating with the union really is in keeping with the salaries that the prosecutor's office has. It's not in excess of that.
Yeah. The difference being that yours is a fully refunded.
Yeah, right.
Which has never happened before, to my knowledge. Sonny, you've been around this for a long time. Have you ever heard of those kind of percentages? Yeah, I've never heard of this. It's a unique situation that the sun and the moon all lined up for this one. Thanks.
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you, council.
And our last presenter for today is the Cuyahoga County Personnel Review Commission. Rebecca Kupczynski asked for it to be rescheduled. Are you doing better?
I'm doing much better. Thank you, Councilman, for asking.
Okay,
I
good.
appreciate it.
Okay.
Good afternoon, members of council.
Do we have?
Yes, it's in your packet.
Is it in the packet?
It's right behind the Public Defenders Commission.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity to come here today. I'd also like to thank our helpful staff from the OBM department, Sybil Haney and Brianna Witt, who've been really supportive and helpful during all of this. So I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through my presentation today, answer
A little bit louder, please.
Okay. I plan to answer some of the questions that you asked me, and then I'll answer any others that you have at the end of my presentation. The first question that you asked was whether or not the projected budget from the county executive matches up with ours. And I would say we're pretty close when you look at the fact that 97% or so of our budget is salaries and benefits. We do have an item that I need to talk to you about in a couple of minutes, but when we look at what they've proposed and what we're projecting in terms of our personnel costs, we're pretty much in line with that. The second question you asked was whether we are fully staffed, and I will tell you that as of 3:45 today, we are. That is a relatively recent scenario. We have only been fully staffed for about 2 weeks. We've had a tough year, but I will tell you we have 18 FTEs on board today and 6 part-time employees. We do have 2 interns working with us, our part-time hearing officer, and 3 are through commissioners. We did have some significant changes this year. We have had 6 full-time employees resign since January. Those were voluntary resignations. That was about a third of our staff, and it was very challenging. We did extensive exit interviews with them. We have some insights we didn't have before. But by and large, I will tell you, we've been able to replace those folks. We're thrilled with the quality of folks that we have on board today. So we're moving forward, and I think we're back to our former efficiencies. But it's been tough. The other thing that we are in process with is we are implementing remote proctoring and testing. That is a tech solution that we have been looking at for some time, and obviously was propelled forward by what happened with COVID. But we are hoping that not only will that allow us to address the situations that we had to deal with COVID, because we're still doing many more administrations of testing because we have to do social distancing in our room. So whereas before we could test 30 or 40 people at a time, we can't do that anymore. But we're also hoping to expand the county's applicant pool to go not only regional, but out of state and nationally, and we can go anywhere with this. And we're also hoping that eventually that's going to help us with our testing and attendance rates. We have always struggled We know that our attendance rates hover pretty much around what most civil services commissions do, but we've never been satisfied with that, so we're really hoping that this tech solution is going to help us resolve that. We will need, if we decide to go forward with this current contract for this particular solution extends to July. If we decide to go forward with that, we would like to have the opportunity to come back and ask for additional funding. We don't have that rolled in our plan at this point because we have barely begun to implement this and we're still doing staff training. I'd like to come back in about 4 months and tell you how it's going. So that's a need that isn't addressed in our projected budget.
So what would be the annual cost on that?
The annual cost right now is $100,000 a year, and so I would think that probably next year, if we come back, we'd be looking for another 50 or so in our budget for next year to cover the second half of next year. We're also anticipating that at some point that may impact our staffing needs going forward. You know, when you bring new technology, and we think that that's going to impact us going forward in the future if we decide to stick with it. My next 2 slides are really about some data that I wanted to share to give you a sense of some of the challenge that we're facing, what the county's facing, and just to show you a snapshot of where we're at in terms of the number of tests that we're giving this year. We're on track to exceed the number of tests that we've ever given in a year. So we're about to break a record. We're expecting to do about 250 tests this year, and that's not administrations, that's just testing projects. I'm sorry, I think that might be out of order. I apologize. But I want to show you in contrast what we're seeing in terms of the number of applicants per year. And that's the slide that has the green trend line on it. The important thing to know here is that as the county's hiring needs have gone up, we're seeing a significant drop off in the number of applicants that the county is getting for its positions. And I think this is important because it not only affects our work, it affects all of those positions that the county is trying to fill in its vacancies. And I know that's been sort of an ongoing part of the conversations with the executives, directors this year. The last thing I brought into this was just our time to complete testing. This has always been a subject for discussion, so I wanted to anticipate that and tell you that on average, we're looking at about 23 days to complete a testing project. That includes about a 2-week window that we use to give applicants notice to come in and take a test because we like them to have adequate time to do that. So otherwise, that's pretty much it. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
So thank you for the presentation.
Welcome.
And my question is whether you're asking for anything additional to be included in the budget at this time.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Questions by my colleagues? You're going to get off easy.
I love it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in. Okay, so under miscellaneous business, I would just note that our next budget hearing will be this coming Thursday, November 4th at 1 p.m. And if all goes well, when we finish that hearing, we will have heard from all of the agencies and the departments, and we'll be in a position to start figuring out what we're going to do. Any other miscellaneous business? If not, there is nothing further to hold our attention. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.